Hi, welcome to Res and the Sienna Equilibrium 2.5. This is going to be a rough cut. Running out of time, so we're going to have to do things as quickly as possible. I would normally go through this a few times. Okay, so we're working from Tale of Two Cities. Currently that's what we're working on, and the section on Res. I hadn't thought to first of all do Res in this section, but as the chapter developed, I suddenly had a different way of looking at it. Here's the previous spreadsheet, and there's a load of stuff going on there. And then there's a lot of different parts to this spreadsheet. So I started a new one, and I've simplified things. Here we've got 16 different sectors, basically, yeah, we can call it that. And let's go then. So of a investment revenue, which produces the cash flow, and materials, starting with 5.497 billion. That's divided into sections of 334 million. Okay, so sorry, one sec. Parched throat. Right, okay, so sector that buys building materials. Okay, and what is building materials? Building materials has bought raw materials from the sector raw materials 1. Okay, now here we have infrastructure 1, city, and that too, of course, that needs building materials. And what's happening here is those building materials are being traded for in a country that neighbours Malawi, or just a little bit further. And in exchange for those building materials, there would be an S-World hub in the various countries that would in turn sell goods, computers and VR goggles that we would make at a comparative advantage. So it's basically swapping the computers and VR goggles for the building materials, and then the building materials are used by Infrastructure City 1. Okay, next we have goods retail, and what is bought is parts for goods, and there's a parts for goods sector inside of the Malawi network. Next we have property developer 1, city, building materials again. And in this case, we're going building materials. I'm going to just correct this as I go because I need to, basically. Right, so there we go. There we're getting a lot of cement. Right, services 1. Services is my 1 week link at the moment because I'm not bringing it in future spins. It's presumed one's already knows enough about spins, etc. from the previous video, so I don't have to explain that in over detail. But the one thing I am missing is services. However, there's a general idea that that's not a bad thing. If there's a huge manufacturing base, services will just appear by themselves. If we look at England, manufacturing versus services, manufacturing it's somewhere about 20%. I don't know, it might be less. And services is somewhere at about 70%, I don't know, something like that. So from that manufacturing base, these services have cropped up, and you know what? If we, manage to make half the stuff we make is goods, and that's 50% of the economy is making stuff, there's huge room for the service sector to grow on top of that. So I'm not overly worried about the fact we haven't got too many services. I'm just noting that it's hard for me to actually put them in at the moment. Okay, so there we go. Services, they're buying retail goods from the retail goods section inside of the network. When we see this sector that sells, that's inside of the network, internationally trades for, that's a different country or set of countries. Okay, raw materials 1, 2, 3, and 4. 3, 1, 2, 3. 4. Okay, raw materials again. This is one of I want to do a whole nother version of this, but instead of all these blues, just doing the Gigafactory. Gigafactory is from Elon Musk, and in the documentary Before the Flood, Leonardo DiCaprio's excellent documentary, Musk says that there's his Gigafactory that he has built is going to produce 1% of all the batteries that are needed if the whole world, I think, was to swap to electronic cars. I think that's the stat. And you know, Musk, huge hero of mine, want him to be the head of S-World UCS for various reasons, and want to do the Mars Resort Network, which is basically, this is actually a prototype for the Mars Resort Network. That's why it's worth him liking this project even more. The general idea was somehow they would create a gigafactory in Malawi, and maybe that would be half of all the money, $2.5, nearly $3 billion spent on just that, and it would just pump out batteries, and that would just be, we would see gigafactory in all of these, nearly all of these, and it would be just trading for what we need, passing that on. So you know, there's a little bit of future planning, a little different way of doing the same thing. But as specifically here, Gigafactory has made a load of batteries. It has traded those batteries internationally with various countries for raw materials, and because they're raw materials, obviously it's the closer the countries, the better. These raw materials then bought by this sector with that amount of money. So I am just need to have another sip of water. Right, next, the peak tent and Susskind boost isn't 6.25%. It should be half of that, and the other half should be allocated to the software. But for simplicity, I've just molded it all into one. And what I've done is, this is an in and out. What this is, if we just say this is the peak tent, don't worry about the software for now. We'll put that in at a later point. It's not hard. The peak tent and Susskind boost, basically what it's doing is it's protecting the weakest companies. If not necessarily by giving them money, but by making more opportunities for them, marketing, etc., etc. And as this is an in and out, i.e. it's coming out from all the companies and it's going into the weakest, we can just have it as an in and out. Right, the math works perfectly well. So you can see all the way along here, it's the same thing. It's basically saying that's it's going to be spread throughout pound for pound throughout the network. Right, okay, investors. And this is the clever thing about the spins, is we can see we've got we're paying the investors back 12.5%. So there we go. They'd have invested collectively 5 billion, or actually they'd have actually collected twice as much, but the first half of that is pre-2024, and for that they own a share of the companies, and that their equity is their investment in the first case. But on top of that investment equity, they get 12.5% per year to pay for their own companies in Malawi's operations. So these investors will receive 340 million in real estate, basically. That's the first place they want to set themselves up their offices, and they'll buy that from property developer one, City. And the second half is goods, various goods, this, that, and the other. It's a broad. It would go to many different places. I've just put goods because that makes it simpler. Note that in all of these cases, we're not including the labour. This is just the money-to-money process. The parts make bigger parts, make goods, make buildings, make skyscrapers, etc., etc. Labour is counted here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've gone for 25% of all investment goes to labour, but at least 25 and probably 50% of that is a welfare initiative that pays the workers, families, etc., back in their villages, so that one idea is that half of all the salary income goes back to the villages and is distributed. About 8 people per one employee. And that allows people to be in full-time sports and education, which is raising the crop for the next year and raising the crop for the year after, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so that's Labour's spending this time. Remember, it's all network credit, so all of this money has to go to one of these places or another. And that's this E here is 100%. If this E was less, which it will be, I've just kept it at 100 because it makes it simpler. Some of that money will trickle out of the network and go other places. But for now, Labour is spending their money on full-time sports and education, real estate, food and drink, and cars. All directly luxury items. There's a mistake there. Okay, I'll have to come back to that later. Okay, I know it's because I swapped that recently. Okay, never mind. You know, it doesn't break it. I could just change that. Note, this isn't the only Labour spending. There's other Labour spendings, and obviously it wouldn't all be spent this on this and this on this. You know, we're splitting this between thousands and thousands of different products. Okay, government receives a loyalty bonus that they spend immediately, or in 2024 at the beginning they spend it on real estate. This is a case for let's just do these. Forget about this one because this one was the problem. Real estate is bought from property developer. Spartan is Spartan Contract. Spartan Contract is the idea that over 16 years every Spartan worker will pay for their own property and will end up with their own properties. They all become, and these are nice properties. There's sort of, you know, 4-star with spacious gardens, etc. Yeah. You know, why build a lot of budget housing when you can build really nice housing for not that much more? So there you go. That's the idea there. Food and drink, obvious. That's probably going to the villages mostly. Cars, the S-World GT. That's not Gran Turismo. That is Google Tesla. Labour are building cars, and one thing about cars is, when every property is sold, no matter if it is to Labour, no matter if it is to companies for their offices, no matter if it is as entire network cities to people like the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund or Harvard, or, you know, there's actually thousands of different people who could end up buying a network city or being interested in it. Yeah, so of all the real estate, add about 6.25%, and that is automatically going to electronic cars, Google Tesla maybe. The idea there is that Google gets to test their infrastructure and has a place to actually, their cars can actually go on the road, which I think for them is very valuable. You know, their ambitions, you know, the sooner they can get the cars on the road, as long as they're safer than normal cars, and the stats prove it, I can't see a problem with it. You know, obviously at first there's only going to be limited infrastructure where they can work, but over time, as everything gets bigger, they become more widely seen. So there we go, cars for Labour. We got government. Yep, back to the government. Real estate from property developer 2. That's more Spartan homes. That's more social housing, 4-star social housing though. Remember, with the relatively large gardens each. Which would start by basically getting a field, farming field, rezone it into residential, and then just turfing it off. So, and you know, there'll be a sort of mobile home, a small mobile home, and around these plots. And as time goes over, they'll start building up the houses, and then everyone's got, you know, nice spacious housing. Land is cheap at the moment. Won't be in 2039. Okay, so that's property developer. They're buying infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure, lot of indications that infrastructure is a key growth factor. Solar arrays powering the solar arrays that are split. I think 256 different mini solar arrays and 16 large solar arrays in the first phase. Right, okay, so that's there. Good solar. Maybe built, probably assembled in Malawi, but most of the parts probably coming from outside. Okay, so there we go. That is where the initial spending is being spent. We can see that each of these will have been paid this amount for their goods, and these all get to take away. They've got their solar arrays. They're now planted, whatever. They're now there. They're real. They're powering stuff, and that's awesome. There's roads, you know. There's social housing up there. The Labour has got some new cars. They've got food and drink for the villages. They've got their more put to social housing and full-time sports and education. Remember, I have to worry about this. I'm just going to change that to red. There we go. And that will actually spin out the whole chain going to the right, as we will see now. Okay, so here we go. This is spin number 1. Revenue is this. This is the initial revenue. 5.47 billion. Split 16 sectors, albeit this would actually be split between about 2,000 different companies. Okay, these are just the sectors of those companies all put together. Batched companies. Right, okay, so there we go. That's the first spin. There, that's the money there. Now we've got to take off the tax, which is 18.75%, and that is all taxes. That is including VAT, that is including payroll taxes, that is including all the taxes. But you see, because we spin it, and this will make more and more, that it ends up being, you know, a huge amount of tax, a lot of tax, about 10 times more tax than they'd be making at the moment, i.e. spending can go up tenfold. Yeah, exactly. That's on a E95 spin 8 model. Sorry, this is a E100 spin 3 model. Okay, so there's the tax. We're taking the tax off. That's the revenue after tax. There's the labour. We're taking labour off. There's the revenue after labour. There's the revenue after labour and after tax. And that goes on to buy the next phase. The next phase. Raw materials. What is bought is more raw materials, so they can wholesale them, and that comes from. There we go. It's raw materials 1 buys raw materials from abroad. Raw materials 2, which is swapped for computers and VR goggles. Okay, we've been through this, so I'm not going to go through it again. It's just the same as before, but note all of these are now companies. I've taken the labour and government income here. Okay, and this basically starts again. You see, now the government's getting their tax twice. You see, now this time they're going to spend it on Mark Zuckerberg's Concept 911 internet access. Good on you, Mark. And how does this work? There's a sector that sells. Yep, there's a company, probably Mark's company, maybe, I don't know. It seems to be something he cares a lot about, so happy to that sector. So yeah, government's buying 911 internet access. So basically, servers. And actually, you know, Google could come in here as well. Actually, it would have to be a Google and Facebook venture, and even Virgin and SpaceX. All of them have different ways of providing the internet, or they're working on it. Google use air balloons, working on that. which will work definitely for the rural areas. It's brilliant. Facebook are looking at drones. I could imagine that would work just as well, but I'd prefer a balloon than a buzzing drone. People don't like drones. So, you know, whatever. Virgin Orbit is very serious about putting a low satellite network in place, and Musk has a similar ambition as well. I think this information might be out of date now. It's just what I've read over the time. Okay, so anyway, government now gets to spend on the 911 internet access, $340 million. It gets to buy more infrastructure. Yay, motorways. I don't know, motorways, trains, who knows. And some of this infrastructure should probably go into the neighboring country of Mozambique to improve the port and improve access to the port. Very, very, very critically important Mozambique is. So they would probably get a lot. You know, maybe all of this would go to Mozambique, $340 million. Trouble is, when it goes out that way, that ends the spin, because, well, no, not unless there was a smaller network in Mozambique that could handle all the infrastructure there, then it would be fine, I suppose. Okay, government couture. I want the government well dressed, and this is also a nudge to that I want to pay the politicians a lot more, so there's less incentive for corruption, and more incentive to get the job. And that's not just because of that. I believe that should be the case in the UK as well. I believe there's a bit of a brain drain going along. People who, you know, there's no doctors in, well, it might be. I don't know of any doctors. Certainly, there's, you know, it might be better if doctors got jobs in government, then they would know more about running the health service than someone who has no history of the industry, maybe. Just putting it out there. Okay, so Labour, again, they're now spending their money. They're going to buy some food and drink, which is swapped. They're buying the food and drink from probably the neighbouring countries, yep. And that's swapped for solar powers for the neighbouring countries. Real estate, again, property developer 2, Spartan. Luxuries, luxury goods. Labour loves luxuries. No matter if you're poor or rich, everyone likes luxuries, albeit the price of luxuries is much more when you're rich. But the general idea is to create luxury goods, so as people are not buying other luxury goods at a price that's wrong. And in general, the ambition of this welfare, education, sports, which centres around a soccer league, but really it's just the best way to get the network together, get the best people in the get the most influential people together. They play the soccer anyway. The idea there is that they would the people who benefit from these initiatives may receive luxury goods or other goods, so they can trade them for food and stuff in their home village, as opposed to making food and drink, you know, a real big priority. It'll be there, but it'll only be about 20% of what's going on. Other villagers can get luxury goods given to them, basically, as a part of, you know, one or this government scheme or that government scheme, and then they, you know, they're bought, you know, via Labour, and then they can make a little cooperative shop around where the soccer club is, and sell their goods from there. You know, start making markets, but just by constantly providing them with some luxury goods and some easily goods to sell that they can trade, and, you know, everything starts working, you know, more. Right, okay, so we've got this, and again, we now have to actually take off the tax and the labour for the tax and labour sector. You see, it's just continually moving the money around. I'm not going to go into this because we've seen this before. We've seen this many, many times. And just that wonders there is stadiums. And here we see again, I'm taking off the, there we go. We're taking off So this is now the third lot of $343 million that the government has received. Sorry, no, the ninth, because there's 3 of them. So the government are now getting a ridiculous amount of money from this 18.75% spun tax, spun 3 times. Spin it 8 times, it's even more. Okay, again, I don't think I need to go through these because we've seen how this works. This one here, buying more infrastructure, hospitals and medical equipment, good solar trading for food again, property developer, more FC Soccer League, entertaining and eating out. And yeah, there we go. That's the spreadsheet. Now we check. I've just added everything up here, and that equals the correct amount. That's basically the next year. Where we're now at is the next year, and the next year with an E of 100 and no other expenses leaving the network means whatever the network started with in investment, it ends with the same. However, on its journey, it has spent 5, 10, 16.49 billion in cash flow, which about half of that would be GDP. This would carry on, either spinning, or this would be the next year. Is there anything else I need to? Yeah, no, I think that's it. I think we've seen how that works, and we see the beginning of the next year. We start with what we started with. Note that this does not include any sales of the 4. Let me just go to this. Where is it? This doesn't include any additional major income streams. This is just from the original investment, basically going through the economy and ending up as the same amount of cash flow to spend the next year. On top of that, we have network cities, which are the idea of finding, like the sovereign wealth fund. They've got $1 trillion, $1 billion per year for about 10 years invested into their own network city. Some which companies will obviously be some of the companies that we're talking about would obviously be based there. That's one way to make extra money. Aid various governments and NGOs, and there's a lot of reasons why this is a much better system for their aid than other countries. International trade, that's so far we've only swapped things internationally. There's been no surplus, and there would be, especially with the to America, if the AGOA, I think it is, scheme is, if we can adhere to that, which I'm pretty certain we can. And lastly is non-networked companies in Malawi buying goods. And whilst Malawi's economy is only 5.5 billion, actually it's probably 4 times that, because a lot of the trading doesn't get knocked up to GDP because it's not counted. Right, okay, so yeah, all of this would basically come on top and would potentially double the amount of revenue in the second year, initial revenue in the second year, albeit it won't because of E. The efficiency would be less than 100%. It would be 90 to 95. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot for listening.